Test, test, David. All right. Let's see the microphone that we have, audio. Test, test. Yep, that should be good. Turn wrong. Okay. All right. So stream should be back up and on and live. Let's check all the other resources. We should be back in full effect. Let's see here. No, we are back. All right. We got sound. Sounds good. All right. Let's get back to our presentation 2.1. We had a little crash. So for those of you guys waiting, we're getting back. We are getting back going again. Okay. So I think I'm back up. I'm going to join you guys in a second. What slide number? Somebody tell me what slide number we're on? Oh, I should probably unmute myself. Can somebody tell me what slide number we are on? Hello, hello. Oh, you don't see the pit. Okay. I'll find it then. So let's see. Oh, that's right, because you guys don't have you don't some of you don't have access to the portal yet. So I believe we just completed empower team members and stakeholders. And we're now going to be on train team members and stakeholders. So let me share again. System is back up. Let's get Zoom going here. So, all right. So let's see here. All right. So as we come here and open back up Zoom for you guys. Unable to connect to Zoom. No, don't do that to me. There we go. Here's our PMP course. We'll start. Okay. So I'll exit this one now. All right. Join back with audio. So now let's share the screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at here. And so the rest of you guys are just going to hear me speak, but for those of you guys can you confirm you can see the screen again? Can you confirm you can see the screen again for me?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Back in business. All right. So, 6 to 10 digit key. Name. Oh boy. Hmm. Well, maybe I don't need to be the host for now, but hopefully, if I can share, you guys are good. You can see it, then we're all good. So we'll continue moving forward. All right. So now we're on train team members, train team members and stakeholders. So what we're looking to do now is we're looking to get a training and a mentoring plan. We want to get estimates for how much it would cost to train those folks and a calendar of when training would be available. We also want to assess how well is the training doing for our team, for our organization, and any certifications, right? If we want to pursue those. So we'll look at the gap analysis, we'll look at pairing and mentoring, and training as tools in order to achieve that. So training and coaching, right? Training and coaching. Training focuses on building individual skills for use in the moment, in the present, whilst coaching helps develop well-rounded individuals through long-term professional relationships between novice and experienced employees. Okay, that's the text that you see on the screen. What I will tell you is it's a little more like this. Whereas, because if we're going to bring mentoring, I'm going to bring mentoring into the mix, just so you understand. Training, coaching, mentoring. All right. Mentoring is where someone will use their experience and they'll lend you their experience so that you can have an idea of what may or may not happen if you proceed in the manner that you were already going to proceed or if you make a change, right? So mentorship really does. It's like, well, back in my day, this is how we did it. Or, when I was doing something like this, I did this and this is what happened, right? That's what mentorship is. Coaching. Coaching is then looking at that specific individual and helping them to upskill, helping to identify their strengths, their weaknesses, and putting together a plan to help upskill them. And then not only that, but helping that person position themselves in the best possible way for success. But that's what coaching is, right? Identifying like what you need, helping you get it, and then putting you in that position in order to be successful. And then training is where when that identified need, now we're going to specifically tackle that individual skill and we're going to upskill you in that area, right? So that's training and coaching, but also mentoring because that's going to come into play later on. And I feel it's warranted to be mentioned now. Oh, my battery die? No, it didn't. All right. So we look at required competencies as well. Right. What do you really need to do? And that's the first aspect of developing your training plan. What do we need to do? And what are the knowledge, skills, and attributes that my folks need to have in order to do it? And now that I know what's needed, now I can go back and perform some sort of gap analysis and understand what the required competencies are, what my team has in order to achieve that competency, and what we need to do to fill the gap. Right. And so team members themselves may require specific training on the customer's business, the customer's culture, right? The context of the project. Those are the different things that we'll have there. So, elements of training. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing for me to really add here. We know training is an activity in which team members acquire new or enhanced skills, knowledge, or attitudes. And the idea here is that it can be virtual instructor led. Hey, that's what we're doing now, live and online through a virtual meeting like Zoom, right? We can do that all the time. Or you got hands on labs as well. You got the self paced e learning. Maybe you don't have time to sit and listen to it live. So then you go and you watch my videos afterwards, right? Maybe you do it that lasted a second. I thought they'd be here for a few minutes. That lasted a second. And then document reviews, right? Going back and looking at documents that contain relevant information, whether it's about the project or the product that can help people learn more information. But these are the different things that we can do in order to train our team members. All right. Very straightforward. And this virtual instructor led training, it can be live. It doesn't have to be virtual. All right. It can be live as well. So some guidelines to determine that required competency. Well, all right. Go, but you guys can read this on your own. Stakeholders have unique training needs, and everything is based on context. So there's some guidelines for that. Now, if we look at the training plan and the options for training, right, it should be done as close to the point of solution use as possible. Now, it may be that you need to do it 3 or 4 weeks in advance because you need 3 or 4 weeks of time and understanding before you're able to use it. It may be that you need 3 or 4 months in advance. But the idea is that use it as close to the point of solution as possible. What do we mean by that? You guys are taking this PMP course right now. If you're going to manage a project and you want this class, well, you should get this training as close to the project you're going to manage as possible. Meaning, if you're going to manage a project 2 years from now, why take the training now? If you're not going to manage any project in between then, right? Maybe there's other stuff you can do. Maybe you still do it now. Who knows? But the point of the matter is that we're trying to say, hey, take a look at it, get people ready as close to that point as possible. Scheduling is critical. Make sure there's no delays, right? And using that gap analysis, figure out what's missing in that skill set, in that knowledge base, and then prepare a plan that helps them to improve in their competencies. All right. So that's the idea of training plan and training options. Pretty straightforward. Then there's cost estimates. Don't overthink this one either, right? As part of our schedule and budget, we have to consider the cost that it takes to do. And then we think about the schedule as well, because remember, time is money. And if we have multiple people that are in this training, well, we are still paying them, right? They're showing up that day at work. So that will cost money as well. So there's the content creation and editing if we have in house staff that are performing this work. There's hosting and delivery costs if we need to have an LMS, a learning management, solution or system that your company may have. The cost for an instructor, the courseware, printing it out, and all these things cost, right? So what we're saying here is take this into account. Think about it all the way. Don't just say, "Oh yeah, we got to pay for training." Remember that you might have to go and rent a facility, and you might have to have food, and you might need to rent somebody to facilitate that training, and you might have to pay a license fee for those. So we're just saying, hey, go a little bit deeper, peel back the layers of the onion, and make sure you've done the work. Need to have a calendar that you can publish in support of the training dates and locations, right? If that is needed. And remember, we're not just talking about training our team members, but we also may need to train the customer. We may need to train the customer on how to use the product, on how to operate the product, right? We may have internal customers that we need to train on just how to find out information about the project. Okay, every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, we're going to update the budget and the schedule, and it's going to be right there. You might even have to train your people to quit asking our team members and go to the wall, because every time you guys bother them, they're getting less work done, right? So that's kind of the idea that we're looking at here. Even with a training calendar, it can go to be that specific, right? So we'll publish it. We'll create some mechanism that people can register and get a confirmation that they've registered. We'll be able to provide a roster so people know, what the class is and who they are. Like not all classes are like that. Not all classes do you need to capture signature of attendees, but that's the idea of having this training calendar. And then certifications. There's industry certifications that would demonstrate your knowledge. So, Shaheen, I believe you said you either have the CSM or the PSM, right? The Professional Scrum Master or Certified Scrum Master. And you have the PSM? Oh, the CSM, right? All right, so that's just another industry certification that demonstrates your knowledge of being a Scrum Master, right? And that's all this is. And so now here's another industry credential that you guys are looking for, right? The more portable can be more desirable, and that's the case with the PMP. That's why you guys are in this class, right? PMI has done a great job positioning this credential worldwide to be the number one, to be the gold standard. There's pairing and coaching. Pairing customer stakeholders together enables them to reinforce the learning in each other. I don't know if that's all true, but I will say this: when you have when you have the customer with a developer, or when you have two stakeholders together, they learn from each other whether they know it or not. Because first of all, they learn each other's tendencies, their likes, their dislikes. They learn more about the product as they discuss. So if you now take away customer stakeholders, because remember, we talk about training stakeholders and team members. And if you're to put your team members in that position, that's what we're talking about. Then we're talking about if you pair two people together. Sometimes you might put a very senior person with a junior person, and the junior person will teach the senior person something because they'll do something in a way that the senior person never thought of doing it. Why? Because they're an expert. They've been doing their same way, and it's been so successful for them. They're not thinking that there's a different way, right? So it works both ways here. It works both ways. And remember that training focuses on building individual skills to be used in the present. We're not training you for something next year, right? Boxers, MMA fighters, they don't train for the fight next year. They train for the fight that's coming up. So that's the same thing here. That's all the slide is telling you. And your relationships can be informal, they can be ad hoc, right? They might be formally established by the organization, or maybe a training department within the organization, right? There may be a way to intentionally pair participants in that manner, but that's pairing and coaching there. And then when we're done, we want to know, did folks learn what they said they were going to learn? Or that the training said that they would be taught at the very least? Are they getting what they need? So we'll take a baseline assessment, a pre and a post, right? The baseline assessment can be considered the pre, and we always hear post, right? So if you're seeing that term baseline assessment for the first time, think of that as a pre-assessment or a pre-test, right? And so now we see that word efficacy. You've probably heard that term by Dr. Fauci, right? You've heard him use that, the efficacy of the vaccine, and how well is it? Well, we want to measure the efficacy of the training. That's the same thing for you guys here. At the end of this class, How well was I able to get across these concepts to you? How well was I able to describe them in your scenario, right? In your world, in your industry, in your project environments, that helps you to understand the information, not only pass the exam, become a better project manager, right? That's my big goal. And so that's like, your pre and your post, right? You guys will let me know. Every class lets me know at the end. You guys will let me know. You will give me that assessment of how you've done, and that really speaks to how I've done as well, right? That's kind of the idea of your pre and your post, or your baseline and post training. And then obviously we want to measure the outcomes. Those post assessments and the certifications will demonstrate that you're able to apply the knowledge and skills. So some guidelines to ensure that training occurs. Again, I'll let you guys read this on your own time. Create awareness, create washers, craft your signatures, right? These are just guidelines. Let's move on to topic F. Engage and support virtual teams. All right, this is timely for our current environment. Our COVID environment. Everybody's working remote. We're still working remote. Last year when we started working remote in March, we thought it was going to be 6 months. And in March of this year, we're like, yeah, in 6 more months in September, it's going to be gone. And like, here we are, we're all still working remote, right? So this is something that, and it's probably a blessing in disguise that we've been able to learn that we can still be efficient doing this. So here we are. You guys are taking this class. You might not have taken this class virtually prior, right? But now you're in the comfort of your own home. You're able to take this on a day and a time that works. And so we want to think about how we support our teams in that same manner. All right. So we think about the use of collaboration technology, how we assess the engagement. We need a communication plan, and our team charter should outline some of this. And then we'll look at tools like variance analysis, the difference between what you thought and what is, right? Influence, the calendar tools that we use, how we manage conflict, how we communicate. We'll use these as tools in order to achieve the deliverables mentioned prior. So we take a look. Here's a nice little pretty picture. I don't know what this. I guess these are people. These are people inside the circles, and these are connections. You know what this reminds me of? If you remember that game that we played in grade school, where you had the cup and a little piece of string, and you whispered something, and somebody heard it, and they whispered something to somebody else, and by the time it yeah, yeah, telephone. By the time it got to the sixth person, it was like the message was completely different, right? It's completely different from what we said. Well, that's the idea in project management. The more entities that you need to communicate with, or that may be able to communicate with each other, the more that you need to set up a system that ensures that the message that needs to be delivered is delivered to the right group or the right person at the right time, in the right level of detail, and the right granularity, and the right format, all of that stuff, right? And so it's successful to teams. Our charter should include the expectation, communications, and details. We've been mentioning this already, like, what's the response time? We even used SLAs as an example to describe that. And even a good retrospective can talk about how teams can improve their communication, right? When we talk about what we should start, stop, and keep doing, you'll see hints, you'll see themes of what the team is telling you of what they need when you look at the results of your retrospective. Now, communications and the team charter kind of fit together, because as a PM, you have to facilitate the creation of this thing, right? What's the initial approach to the communications that's going to be in our team charter? You have to sort of bring the skeleton to the team and give them an idea of the type of person that you're building. Is it tall? Is it short? Is it skinny? Is it fat? Is it wide? Is it, what avatar are you building? What person, what team are you building? What is our culture of our team? You need to bring that so the team can pick and choose. Then they can put the flesh on, they can put the skin on, and they can fancy it up with their clothes at the end. That's like making it a nice, neat document, and maybe drawing on it, putting it up on the wall, right? But you got to bring a skeleton, a straw man. You'll hear that other term as well. You need to bring something like that to the team. And then you can ask these type of questions like, what's our meeting types? How often should we update status reports? You know, I challenge all of you on this call right now. This may be unpopular, but I challenge you, do your status report. I'm not saying don't do the status report, but don't send it out. Purposely don't send it out one day. See, did anybody yell or scream? Did anybody said, "Hey, where's my status report? Where is it?" If you don't get one of that, then what that tells you is that your status report is not an effective measure of communicating the progress to your stakeholders, that there has to be a better way. It might be the medium you're using, it might be when you're sending it out, it might be the information that's included. But again, I will challenge all of you on this call right now. Don't send a status report out one day. Just wait. Like, no, I can get fired. Oh, I forgot to send it out one day. Everybody makes an honest mistake. But in this sense, you're testing. You're testing the team. You're testing to see if this communication is the right thing. That's not something that a lot of people would promote. But I will tell you, if you really want to know, all right, if you really want to know, that's how you do it. It's one way. You have to know, and you have to be able to try some of these things. And so we might even put it in our team charter that, hey, at some given moment, this is what we're how we're going to communicate. This is what will change. If X happens, Y will take place, right? So you encourage your team to adopt their own practices, and you'll encourage them to also have effective collaboration. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, those are things that we should be doing, right? Now, in terms of collaboration technology, right, it does enable us to plan together, to communicate together, but it's not a substitute for team planning activities. You still have, just because people are meeting virtually, right, doesn't mean that, oh, we got a tool, put it in Jira, put it in Teams. Nope. You still need to facilitate people. You need to get them together. You need to show them how to do it. You might need to put an example of what it should look like, what the finished project product should look like, how it would work, some type of pitfalls that they might find when they go there. You have to give people an idea of what to expect, right? People don't like walking into the unknown, right? So give people, an idea of what to expect, especially when you're talking about uh, technology. And then when you do that, right, you see this transparency considerations will factor into which collaboration technology is chosen, right? That is just the idea of like, do I want to know if you're online all the time? Do I want to be able to see your face? If you make a comment, should everybody be able to see it? Should it be just between you and that person? Right? So you'll think about those tools. When should we use Slack versus when should we use Microsoft Teams versus when should I just send this to you in an email? Right? And again, your charter may say some of this, but these are things that we think about when we're using collaboration tools, right? Message and chat boards, right? Knowledge repositories like OneDrive or a SharePoint where we can store shared documents. You might use video conferencing tools like a Zoom, right? I've mentioned all the other ones. Your Cisco WebEx, your GoToMeeting, Teams can do it. There's so many tools out there that you can use to enhance the ability of folks to communicate when they're in a virtual environment. And oftentimes they come with the ability to have these calendar tools where we can share calendars. Folks can know when someone's in, when they're out, when they're available, when they're not. These are things that we want to keep in mind, and we want to have this available so that we know what's going on with the team. Earlier we talked about blackout periods. Oftentimes the blackout periods are in direct response to the ability to have the right resources available should something go wrong in that moment. And if we don't, blackout period, right? So if your team members aren't going to be available, you might need to have a blackout period for the project as well, right? So keep these calendar tools in there. And then you see these time boxed meetings. We talked about this when we time box a sprint, right, to 1 or 2 weeks, or we time box the ability to respond to a retrospective to 2, 3, or 4 minutes per each piece. That's the idea of keeping people clear about what they need to do and keeping them on track, right? So you can use these type of tools to help people work, right? So the team needs to decide how to best manage that calendar with an eye towards the goal of visibility among the team and relevant key stakeholders. This is so true. But you, as the PM, need to create that culture, or you need to facilitate the movement of people from one point to the next, right? Whether that's just persuading them, uh, talking to them about the benefits and how they use it, helping people, sitting down with them one by one, being hands on the keyboard if you need to. But it's kind of the idea. When we think about virtual team member needs, right? You got to be able to facilitate and ensure that collaboration is going to happen. And so one of the things that we can have is a shared goal, right? This is big in our sprints and in teams that are using Scrum, and we'll have a sprint goal because oftentimes we might complete all the work and not achieve the goal. And then other times we don't complete all the work, but we still achieve the goal And if we have a shared goal that lets everybody know what we're doing, what we're working towards at the same time, we'll be able to collaborate with each other. All right. We know what our roles are. And sports is the best example of this, right? You'll see some of the best coaches, the Bill Belichick's in the NFL, I'm forgetting his name. I can see his face from the San Antonio Spurs, Greg Popovich's. Those types of guys are hey, just do your job. Do your job. Be where you're supposed to be at. We all have one goal. We're working towards one thing. Everybody knows what their roles are, what the expectations are for them. And if we can do that, then we'll have a lot of success within our project. And then there's some alternatives for virtual folks, right? We can focus on the dynamics of the team. We can focus on transparency. We can focus on accountability. All of these things is a part of us managing their engagement levels. And it requires us to persistently focus on them. Right? We always have to pay attention to how effective is the communication between folks because once it's virtual, you lose the ability to always see facial expressions. You lose the ability to always hear all of the tone of voice and the vocal inflections that happen. You lose that ability to just have that nonverbal language that helps you to communicate with people. Sometimes silence communicates things much, much more than talking. However, when everybody's always on mute and always silence, now the silence can't tell you the story that you would normally get. Right. So you really have to think about some alternatives and how you can manage the engagement level of your team members. So yes, use video conferencing tools to facilitate that, right? Active participation, right? If you all were on my team and this wasn't like a course, it wouldn't be optional. I'd be like, hey guys, come on, let's put our cameras on. I want to see your smiling faces. I might say funny. I'm not gonna force you, but I'm gonna try to persuade you and influence you and say certain things that makes you want to. Yep, everybody, let's have our cameras on. Now we can all have conversations. We can see each other. We know what's going on, right? There's a lot of positives to it. There's also a lot of negatives to being on camera all day as well. So don't get me wrong, right? It's not a one size fits all thing. You're constantly there. It goes managing engagement by persistently focusing on the dynamics, transparency, accountability, and effective communication. So now, what about in assessing the engagement? Well, you can identify team members who can form a coherent working team. There might be two or three people that live close to each other and they can sometimes do working sessions and are willing to get together. There might be people who work the same hours and are willing to, sort of do things even virtually. So you might need a SME where subject matter expertise is needed. Other capabilities such as effective teamwork, collaboration, and communication are important. Back to sports. Subject matter expertise. I could have the best player in the world, the most expert athlete, but if they can't work as a team, if they can't collaborate with me, if they can't communicate, we're probably still going to lose. Right? If that's the case, you might as well go do individual sport. There's track, there's swimming, there's stuff like that you can go do by yourself. Right? That's kind of the idea, like in work, where we're all battling together. Remember that scrum? The idea of the scrum, everybody pushing the ball forward. That's what we're trying to do here. And as new team members join, well, the team will return to the development stage. We're going to talk about the forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. They call it the Tuckman ladder. We'll talk about that later. You have conflict in virtual teams, right? We've been saying conflict is inevitable, right? But virtual settings make it a double-edged sword because there's less personal interactions. So you get less of a chance to know when someone's joking or, when they're really serious. And, because of that, also, people lack empathy sometimes, and so little disputes can quickly escalate, right? Um, because of the way things are written inside of context, it's like, what does he or she mean by that? What do you mean you keep, taking long lunches or long breaks? What do you mean that I was way off, right? What does that mean, right? And then people sit and stew, and they usually think the negative, right? No one. It's kind of like best example about in this as from the perspective of a project manager when you're putting yourselves in the shoes of your team members and you're thinking about these things. Remember this: people never think the positive. The best example of this is with a loved one, your significant other, the person that you're dating or you're engaged to or you're married to, right? When they're supposed to meet you somewhere at some time, they don't show up, especially in the beginning, you're like, "What the heck? Where's this? They stand me up? What's going on? What happened?" Right? You're thinking. You never stop to think. You know what? I bet you somebody got a flat tire, and they're probably helping them change a tire on the road, and They have to do it all by themselves. That's why they're late. So I'm just going to sit here. It's okay. They're doing a good deed in the world. Nobody ever says those types of things. We always, our mind as humans take us to the negative. If you can remember that, just remember that when you fail to communicate as a project manager to your stakeholders, when you fail to have your team members communicate with each other, you're leaving that empty space, and they're going to fill the empty space with something that they come up and it's something that they come up with in their head that they invent will always be negative. I shouldn't say always. 99% of the time, all right? You're gonna have that one person that's like, "Oh yeah, I figured you were just changing a tire for somebody. They were broke down, right?" You're gonna have that one person who's extremely optimistic, but for the most part, they're going to fill it with the negative. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So that happens a lot with in virtual settings when we have less opportunities to communicate, so we have more silent time with ourselves, and we fill that silent time with creativeness, and that creativeness is always something really bad. It's just kind of human nature. Now, variance analysis. Variance analysis, the difference between where we're at and where we plan to be, right? Good or bad? Can we explain that delta? So the variance, right? And the variance analysis, the analysis of that is why is this happening? What's the degree and the magnitude of variation? Why is this happening, right? So in the context of measuring the effectiveness of our virtual teams, right, we may produce some various reports like how accurate are your estimates? Did you deliver everything in a sprint that you said that you would? Or, are you performing against the targets that we said we would? How often are you away or not available? Right. We might have these different metrics that we'll use to understand, how effective is our team being in this virtual setting, in this virtual environment, right? So that result may be shared as part of the retrospective so that you can solve the problem and you can identify some new lessons learned or you can propose some improvement for folks. So that's the idea there for variance analysis. Now we have guidelines to implement options for virtual team members, right? So again, stuff that you guys can read on your own, some guidelines like focusing on collaborations and how virtual teams require a significant amount of feedback and reinforcement. You guys can read that part on your own. Let's talk about topic G. This is the last topic in lesson 1. Topic G. So we're gonna build. Is that correct? Yes, this is the last topic in lesson 1. So we are gonna build a shared understanding about a project. So now our tools, our deliverables here. We want to get a vision. What's the vision for this project? What should we be doing? We're gonna get the system metaphor or the XP metaphor. If you remember, I told you XP. And oh, why am I drawing a blank on his name? But he's really the father of agile. Like XP is like a lot of the basic. You hear Scrum, 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 Scrum. XP is really where a lot of this comes from. So we'll talk about that metaphor, the system metaphor, and we'll look at the product block exercise. So we'll bring the charter into play, the plan. We might have a kickoff meeting. We might brainstorm with folks, or just meetings in general. We can do any of that in order to help facilitate the development of a vision or a system metaphor, or conduct a product block exercise. So let's look at these. The vision, the desired end state, the desired set of objectives and outcomes. So, based on what you guys have on the call, right? The vision is that we have a successful SAP application security implementation, right? It could be that, our customers are able to have an easier time when they're long compliance searches, or it could be that, we're going to successfully deploy this satellite in this telco in this environment, in this way at this time, right? And go live exactly at this moment, right? These are like the visions that we have for what we're creating. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we define this from the outset of the project. It's clear, right? And that those objectives are there, and it's critical to have these things, right? So the solution or the description would be there. Who's going to use this thing? The intended users. Who's going to use or consume? Who's going to get the benefits? What's the objective? Sometimes the objective isn't to make money. Sometimes the objective might be to eat up market share. It might be to do some remediation work for the government. It might be to satisfy customer requests. Right? We'll use all of these things to determine what's the vision of the end state. What differentiates us from our competitive approach from others? What's the key features and benefits of using our system? So it might include any, all, or none of those. Right? That's your vision statement. What do you see at the end of this thing? What should it, how should it look and feel and smell? The project charter, in my opinion, is that document. Is that document for the project. I call it the North Star. The project charter is our why. It should have our why, right? This is issued by the project initiator or the sponsor, and it formally authorizes the existence of the project. That's one of the things it does, right? Gives you formal authorization to do the project. That's number one. It provides the project manager with their level of authority, right? To apply organizational resources. It gives you the high level scope, schedule, budget, and risk. You should have, excuse me, you should have success criteria. Right? How do I know when I'm successful with this project? Right. So those are the things that, right? You should have your authority level. You should have your high level scope, schedule, budget, and risk. You should know what the end state is. Those are the three things, right? And then the charter, once it's signed by the sponsor, it gives you authorization to provide organizational resources towards the project. Right. So those are the things that the charter gives you. And the big thing here that it has the purpose. This is your why. All right. This is the vision. This is your why or your vision, the purpose. Why are we doing this thing? What's the big idea? So you might have a project overview statement. It'll communicate what the company intends to do. You want to be brief. It just doesn't need to be a big old essay, right? Just be brevity and clarity are key. And then figure out what is the objective of the project? What's the problem we're trying to solve or the opportunity we're trying to seize? Could be both. Right, but what's our objective? And then what's the criteria for success? Right? What's the definition of done? Right? So that's one of the things that we'll try to figure out from the outset. And now that we got authorization via the charter or approval, and you got the project state, the overview statement, now you can start planning the project. So the idea here is that we've gone through everything that you kind of need to start a project on the waterfall side. Let's look at what it looks like from an agile perspective. So Scrum, it's an agile framework for developing and sustaining complex products with specific roles, events, and artifacts. That's a poor definition. I will say Scrum. Scrum it's really like a time management system, but it's a methodology within the agile framework. And it combines both like iterative and incremental approaches. Right? It's really what it is. It time boxes a lot of stuff. So a time box period within Scrum is referred to as a sprint or an iteration. Sometimes folks will call it a sprint. Sometimes folks will call it an iteration. All sprints and iterations are time boxed. 2 weeks is like the industry standard, but you could have 1 week, you could have 3, 4 weeks, right? So sprint planning. Sprint planning, now they call these the ceremonies, right? So sprint planning, if you remember when I described that agile overview, this is where we take a portion of the product backlog. We want to achieve some goal for that time box period for that sprint. And we're able to ask questions to clarify, to do some estimating, and make a commitment. Now that we have this commitment, we have a daily stand up every day, same place, same time of day, same location. All right, needs to be short, 10 to 15 minutes. Does not need to be all day. This is where you're gonna have to work with your team members, right? I don't want a big essay. Don't tell me all about the work and everything that it took. Just go ahead and tell me what you did yesterday, what you're gonna do today, if there's any blockers, right? I don't need to know all the other details because it's not a status report. And at the end of us doing the work, let's review the work in the sprint review, aka the demo. You'll also hear them refer to the sprint review as a demo. All right. And it's what we do at the end. Again, not a death by PowerPoint. It's where we're going to actually bring what we've created to the stakeholders and show them, review it with them, get feedback for what they like, what they don't like, so that can influence what we do next. What's the next most valuable thing that we can provide you? All right. We want them to touch it, feel it, smell it, use it. And then in the end, right before we go back to sprint planning, we'll conduct a retrospective with the team. Right. So these are the ceremonies. There's more. There's backlog grooming. That's a ceremony that happens really just with the PO, maybe the scrum master, the PO. right? There's a few more. There's like there's release planning, there's road mapping, right? But those are more high level. Road mapping, release planning. These are the ones that you'll do, iteratively. You'll do these over and over and over until you're done. In a waterfall project, we'll have a kickoff. In both agile and waterfall, you'll have kickoffs. You'll have kickoffs, right? What's the context of this project? You may have multiple kickoffs. You may have a kickoff to initiate the project with the sponsor and high level folks. You then may have a kickoff with your project management team to start planning and building the overall plan. And then you may have another kickoff with the actual folks who are going to do the work, right? There's some projects that have multiple kickoffs. And so what you'll do during that time, you'll define what's the vision for what we're trying to do. And if it's appropriate, you'll develop a team charter. Right. And if you have a product owner, well, then they'll assist with writing user stories and estimating effort. Right. Prioritizing the user stories and coming up with that initial product backlog. And we'll usually call this sprint zero. Right. When we're just creating everything that we need to get going. That's what we call sprint zero. So you might see that for those of you taking the exam. Sprint zero is that very first sprint that we do to get everything up and running. Iteration planning or sprint planning. Right now, we're just here. If I go back, iteration planning, sprint planning. Now we're just going to dive into each of these, right? Oops. So it's a collaborative ceremony, sometimes called sprint planning. For the team and the customer representative, that customer representative is the voice of the customer, the VOC or the product owner. All right. What you're doing is you're looking at the highest priority ones. The highest, remember, I'm going to go back. I'm going to draw my, here's all my user stories. And then I may have, my line that says, we're only going to look at the stuff above the fold. All right. So we're going to review this section of the highest priority items. We can ask questions. And then after the agreement, we can determine the activities that are required to deliver, right? We'll pick the work and we'll commit to it. We may have a task board. Here's another Kanban board. And you see this work in progress or WIP limits. Usually there's some number. In this case, let's put a 3 because they have 3 cards there. Right? And so what this means is that the team can only work on up to a maximum of 3 things at one time. They don't have to work on 3 things. It could just be 1, but at a max, we can't do more than 3. Usually there's some other column here that we'll have and we'll call it rush or emergency or priority, right? Something like that. And we'll have another limit here. So maybe the team's total capacity is 4 and we'll reserve 1 for the emergency or the fire of the day and then everything else is a 3 here. And it's just another way to visualize the work and enable folks to track progress. It also, it's about being transparent as well. So it gives us visibility into what's happening and kind of allows us to make sure that the team is doing things in the right manner. So as you vote with your team, you have to teach them how to reach consensus. All right. So consensus, decision making process. Everybody knows consensus, but there's different ways to get there. So the fist of 5, if you're familiar with that, the fist of 5, you put your fist up, right? If you've ever seen, I think it was a gladiator. No, gladiator's the thumb. I'll come to that in a second. But the fist of 5 is we're like, hey, I disagree. I disagree, but I'm gonna go along with it. I don't really agree, but I kind of agree. I don't disagree. I'm not in full agreement, but I really like it. Yep, I really agree. Right. So anywhere, fist of 5. Fist of 5 is what we call that. Right. We got the Roman voting. This is the one I was talking about in Gladiator, where it's like, sort of thumbs up, thumbs down. Don't forget we have thumbs sideways. That's sort of like I abstain. I don't know. I'm gonna just go with whatever the group does, right? You have enough people that do that. All right. So yes, no, maybe so. Okay. You can just poll people. You can poll them, ask them what they think. You can do it anonymously. You can do it publicly. All right. And then you can use sticky dots. Sticky dots to prioritize items and lists. You can use colors. You can use numbers. So that's consensus. Then there's the estimating techniques, at least in Agile, right? We see t-shirt sizing. I want you guys to call this affinity. Affinity diagrams is where we want to estimate large subsets or groups of requirements or stories, and we'll do that by placing them in categories. All right, so we'll use affinity diagrams. So if you had like 100 things to estimate, and up on the wall you're like, okay, let's go figure out what each of these are. Let's say this is extra large, large, medium, small, and extra small, right? And then we'll go and we'll start placing the items in each of the categories that they need to be in, right? And we'll do something like that. So that this would be considered an affinity diagram, right? And we use t-shirt sizes. Some places like to use coffee cups. I don't drink coffee, so I don't, venti, grandi. I don't know. I know grandi is not the biggest, but it sounds like it should be, right? That's why I don't use it because it's not right. We just stick to the t-shirt size, and everybody knows extra large, extra small, and extra large. But that's the idea here, right? We can use story points, and it's a relative measure. We'll talk about how you do relative estimating. We're gonna get there when we get to the schedule. All right, but that's another way to do it, and I'll teach you about the Fibonacci sequence, like petals in a flower, rings in a tree, stock market retraces. If anybody's interested in that, Fibonacci sequence will teach you about that. And then planning poker. Planning poker is a game where we'll give everybody, a deck of cards that contains the Fibonacci sequence. And all the Fibonacci sequences is that one number plus the prior number equals the next number. So you see 0 plus 1 is 1, plus 1 is 2, plus 3 is 5, plus 3 is 8, plus 5 is 13, plus 8 is 21, plus 13 is 35. No, 34, plus 21 is 55, right? We'll have these numbers that go there. We usually stop at like 21. We're usually somewhere around these numbers, 1 to 21. Some places will even have infinity, or they'll have a question mark. So you'll have a deck of cards that'll have these numbers, and then we use it to vote on how long does something take. Everybody just put their card up, right? And there's a lot more to it. I'll deep dive into it. Very, very, very useful way, especially if you work with teams where it takes you like 20 minutes to estimate one thing because everybody's like, "Well, I should take this one." Everybody's got to put their opinion in. All right. When you use the Fibonacci sequence and use planning poker, it goes so much more faster. So I will teach you that. Here's the XP or the system metaphor, right? It's called the XP metaphor. You will also see this referred to as the system metaphor, right? The system metaphor. And it's a technique that describes the common vision of how our programming works. So it should be simple and non-technical. So here, because the customer is part of an XP team, the pieces of code discussed on the project should be referred to in language which is understandable to all stakeholders. It's really what they're saying there. So here's a better way. Here's an example of the system metaphor. All right. When you go into a bank and you go to the teller is to the bank as the mobile app, right? The banking as the banking app is to the customer, right? So now, if we're using the system metaphor, well, then the mobile app is the teller. I need to go to a teller in order to deposit a check. Oh, now I can use the app to take a picture. I need to go to a teller in order to transfer funds. Oh, now I can open up my app and I can do that. I need to go to teller pay a bill. Oh, now I can do that within my app, right? I can do all of these things within the app. So that's like the system metaphor. When we're creating a mobile banking app, the app is the teller. All right. That's the metaphor, so to speak. We can also play the product box exercise. And I mean, literally, we'll have a box. If not, we'll have like a whiteboard and we'll have sections of the box. And, we might draw a little logo with the name of the product. We'll describe the features and then we'll put a bunch of sub features on the back. And this is where we want to describe aspects of the solution in the same way that someone in marketing or sales or advertising might describe the features and benefits on the box. And what it does, it helps us with understanding the solution, prioritizing the likes and the dislikes. You can see here where we might use Moscow, must have, should have, could have, would have. We might use that Kano analysis, exciters, satisfiers, dissatisfiers, right? We might use one of those things. So that's where this product box come in, right? Key aspects of a solution that drive the most critical value aspects, right? That's what we're looking for. Right. So that's the idea of the product box exercise. It's just a technique that used to explain an overarching solution. Right, so don't overthink this one. If you've never done it before, just remember product box. Oh, okay. We put the name of the product, little logo, add some features, sub features on the back. And how do we use this? We use it in the same way that a marketer might describe features and benefits. Like, on a website, we're gonna just put it on the box. So some guidelines. You guys can read those. Again, the guidelines, you read those on your own time. So we're going to stop here today and we're going to have a little bit of a conversation and we may be able to continue going, but first let's just look at, sort of the goals for creating a high performing team, right? We want to know what the requirements are. for those team members, and we want to maintain the knowledge transfer. We want to be able to define the ground rules, right? We want to be able to determine negotiation strategy and then organize around the strengths of the team and support team task accountability by using like a charter or something like that, and then ensure the team charter, I should say. Ensure your team members and your stakeholders are adequately trained, right? Both. It can't just be team members. And then you got to continually evaluate the effectiveness of how our team members are engaged, right? That virtual engagement, we got to continue to evaluate them and support them. And then we also have to learn how to reach consensus and support the outcomes of certain parties agreements, right? There might be another group that disagrees. Well, how do you get that other group to sort of be okay with it, right? And so, oops, I went forward a little bit. So that is it for lesson one. The next lesson is starting the project, but let's pause there, and then let me just hear from you guys on what you think so far.
A lot of info. We're good.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
Um, can we do you have like sample questions for the materials that we've covered? Something that we would see on the PMP?
Yeah, we can. We can do that. We have plenty of time. We can do some practice questions. So we'll do that. We will do that. We'll take a break and we'll come do that. Any other comments, questions from anyone? And the pace. Let me ask again, how's the pace? Is it too fast? Is it too fast for anyone?
I think I think it's good. Just trying to take it all in. Definitely reference back to uh, the portal to look through things, but not too many questions as of now. So still trying to wrap my head around it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you'll definitely have an opportunity to do that. You guys can ask me questions anytime to, like right now there's a rule in my inbox. You guys ask me questions, your emails go to the top of the stack. So I answer them, the same day. But then beginning next week, you'll be like all the other students. I answer everybody. Like I just take 30, 45 minutes every day and I answer questions. So, you know, um, it may take me a day or two to get back to you, but I get back to everybody. So just be patient. Because all the prayer classes, right? Those folks are asking questions as well. I asked you guys specifically about the pace because we're 1 hour ahead, meaning we finished at it's 3:58, and I'd like to, typically, ideally, we would finish at 4:58, right at the end of our class today. So we finished with an hour early, which is totally fine. I built in this buffer time for questions or whatnot, so I know today, while there may not have been as many questions, maybe tomorrow or Wednesday you may have more. But we did, I was going through as a regular pace and we still managed to complete a little bit earlier. That happens in virtual settings sometimes as well. Versus like in a live setting, sometimes you're more apt to ask questions. So I'm going to remind you all that this is your professional development. That you need to each be individually selfish. You need to ask as many questions as you can, and let me manage if you're slowing things down. If I answer your question now or get to it later, right? And so far, you guys have done a good job of just interrupting when you need to or putting your hand up. But I want to encourage a little bit more, right? So if you have more, don't feel any type of way about it. Be individually selfish for sure. Okay, so let's do this. Let's take a quick break. I have 3:59. It's gonna be 4 exactly. So why don't we take you guys have been looking at the screen for a while. Why don't we take a let's call it a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 15 after. We'll do questions for a half hour, and at 4:45 we'll wrap up for the day. But I'll stay back and answer some questions or any topics anybody wants to go over. So let's take a 15-minute break. Let's come back. Let's do questions for 30 minutes, and then I'll release the class. And those people that want to stay back and get a little extra, well, I'll stay on for 15 minutes after. Sound good?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. See you guys in 15. that we would do as project managers. That's something that someone in purchasing or supply chain or procurement would actually do, right? So that's the idea of procurement negotiations. But by the way, there's 3 times where the PM is not responsible. So let me tell you those 3 now, and I'll say it again Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Uh, we already saw once. Whenever there's a dispute between stakeholders in that first instance, it's not the PM's responsibility, it's those 2 stakeholders. Okay? That's the first time that so when you're seeing questions on exam and say, "Who's responsible?" It's always going to be the PM, except for these 3, right? I want you to be so confident who's responsible, boom, you just go pick the PM. You don't even read the rest, right? Except for these 3 scenarios. 1, we talked about conflict resolution in the first instance. If they can't solve it, then it gets escalated. Number 2, you just saw here procurement negotiations. That's not something that PMI considers project managers to be responsible for. And the third one is something we called risk owners. And we're going to see that Wednesday. Risk owners. So when we have a potential threat and we have a response to that threat, let's say earthquakes. Here in California, we have the threat of earthquakes under the category of weather. Okay. We don't get hurricanes, we don't get tornadoes like that. Those threats don't exist. Under the category of weather, those threats don't exist here in California, but we get earthquakes. Okay. So, threat, an earthquake, right? So, we may have, well, we can't minimize the probability of occurrence, but we might be able to minimize the impact by, say, being in a seismically retrofitted building, by maybe ensuring that the first aid kits are always up to date, by making sure that we have a supply of canned foods and water somewhere, that there's radios, like emergency radios and batteries. So now there's going to be a risk owner. Somebody's responsible for assuring that the first aid kit is kept up to date. Somebody's responsible for making sure that any food that spoils gets replaced, that we have a constant, sort of inventory system. Somebody's responsible for that. And then when the risk event actually happens, aka earthquake takes place, somebody's going to be responsible for head count. Did everybody get to the right place? Somebody's going to be responsible for alerting others, right? You're going to have all these different tasks. Now, you as a project manager may be a risk owner for a specific aspect, but you're not responsible for implementing the risk response. The risk owner is. You may be the risk owner for that one, but in that case, you're the risk owner, right? So the risk owner is responsible for implementing a risk response, not the project manager. So those are the 3 times: procurement negotiations, conflict resolutions in the first instance, risk owners. And those are the 3 times the PM's not responsible. Right. And so now that you know this, and I'll say this again, and when we get to that part during procurements, we'll talk about it a lot. But you'll remember when you see that, oh, the PM should be lead negotiator. No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't be the lead negotiator. Mm-mm. We have too much to do. We got to manage stakeholders. We got to develop plans. We got too much to do to negotiate. I need somebody in my organization who has time to sit on the phone and go back and forth with that vendor. I got all this other stuff to do. That's the idea of from PMI. Okay, let's do one more. I know it's at 4:45, but last one, last one. A retrospective can be as short as 15 minutes or as long as an hour. The duration of the retrospective can be dependent on all of the following, except the seniority of the PO, the level of conflict or controversy, the size of the team, the length of the iteration. Seniority of the PO, level of conflict or controversy, size of the team, length of the iteration. What is not going to have have an impact on the duration of your retrospective? So first, I don't want you to just try to read and then pick an answer, because you will fail if you do that. Right? It's not what I want you to do. I want you to read, and I want you to always try to find the 2 that you can immediately throw out, that these are not the right answer. The way you pass this exam is you eliminate the wrong choices, and sometimes you will backdoor your way in. You might not know the answer, but you know what it's not. And so by default, you won't even know what one of those choices are. You read something like, I don't even remember this, but I know it's not A, B, or D. It must be C, right? You'll fall into some scenario like that. So, which one is not? let's say this. What for sure would impact the duration of a retrospective? Would the level of conflict have an impact on how long your retrospective is going to be, how long your lessons learned, how long that session with the team is going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a big conflict, it might take a lot longer to resolve. So we know B is out. We know 2 is out, right? Can't be 2. Would the size of the team impact the duration of the retrospective?
Good.
Yeah. You have more people. That's just time for more responses. It's going to take longer. All right. So we know it's not 2 or 3 because both of those things definitely are, the duration of the retrospective is dependent upon those. So now we're left between A and D or 1 and 4, right? Which is least likely for the duration to be dependent on? Will the duration be more dependent on the length of our sprint, of our iteration, right? 1 week versus 3 weeks versus 5 weeks. Would that have an impact on how long our retrospective is going to be? Or would the seniority of the PO have more of an impact?
The length of the iteration.
The length of the iteration, right? Because if you have a long sprint, obviously a longer retrospective. So that means of these 4, the seniority of the PO is not really going to have that big a deal on our retrospective. If it's a very senior PO, we might have a long retrospective, and if it's a very new PO, we might still have a long retrospective. Right. So I want you guys to always do that and backdoor your way into the right answer. Right. So we'll do more examples of that. There's more things I need to teach you. Right now, it's just I just want you guys to see some questions, kind of get acquainted with them and see how they're written and some of the tricks that you need to understand it. But you haven't been presented with enough content yet to even, right? We did 1 of 4 lessons. You did 20% of the lesson. So, you just don't, there's not enough that's been presented to you yet. So don't worry. Right now, it's really just about what I call question theory or exam taking techniques. Because this stuff that I teach you, you can use for any multiple choice exam, right? Any exam out there. This is not just limited to the PMP. So I'll continually show you question theory, how to group these questions, how to break them down, how to eye them and understand how to quickly decipher what it is they're trying to ask you and what they need you to do. Okay, so let's find last one. I'm gonna just read your questions. Okay, need access to slides we're seeing. Okay, so Shaheen, I answered that for you. Chris, I'll send you some. I see your email there. All right, so that's it for today. Um, Tomorrow we'll start again 9 a.m. promptly. We'll begin lesson 2. We're slightly ahead. So I won't go slower, but I'll say this. I'll describe stuff in a little bit more detail, right? I'll make sure I pay a little bit more attention to a couple things that I know of note, since I know we have a little bit more time. We'll still save some time to do questions like we did today. And again, we'll do the same thing tomorrow. You can just, interrupt me at any time, ask any questions. If things pop up in your head tonight, email me. Don't wait. Email me. You got my number to text me. All right. Don't let it stew. You don't have to wait for the next class, right? If I'm up and awake, I'll answer you. I'm one of those people that I might wake up at 1 in the morning, look at my phone, see a question, answer it, and go pass right back out, right? So, and if I don't answer it, that's because I was asleep. So don't worry, you won't, I'll have my phone on silent and you won't interrupt me. You won't, no disrespect. Right now, you guys are my main focus. So whatever you need for this week, I am here and available to you. All right. And that continues going on, but you just don't get that level of access that you're going to have this week. So take advantage. I'm here for whatever you need. Other than that, I appreciate the participation today. I appreciate the energy that you guys brought. Um, don't be shy tomorrow. Don't be shy. You guys turned your cameras on in the introduction. You turn them off. Don't be afraid to turn the camera on when you have questions and ask me a question and turn it back off. Believe you me, on my side of the screen, it helps a lot to get energy from you guys, right? When we're in the classroom, it's one thing, but virtually. So do what you can, but there's no requirements, no requirements there. So have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. If anybody has any last minute questions, comments, concerns, I'll stay back for the last 8 minutes. But other than that, I'll release you guys a little early today. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you so much.
All right. Bye. Oh, you're gonna wait. Okay, you guys are waiting for me to kick you out the room. Okay, I was just staying back, seeing, right. So I'll close the session. I'm glad to see you guys can't get enough of me after one day. You're not sick of me yet. So good night. Those of you out in the world that were following me, we might do this again tomorrow. If you're catching this, and whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on my YouTube channel, whether you're on Facebook, if you want to know a little bit more, we'll do it tomorrow. I might be able to show you the slides in conjunction too. You might be able to get a little studying going on with it. But I wanted you all to be able to get an opportunity to see what this class is like. And for those of you that might need to study but you weren't able to take a class, I'm happy to be able to provide this opportunity for you folks. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave it in for me. I will respond. Other than that, thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a good day.